Good day, goeiedag, fellow South Africans, and in this video, which is attached to this intro, we'll be looking at South Africans who've actually migrated to New Zealand, almost on refugee status from what I can gather. So for people like Shireen, who I know is going over there shortly, I think you'll find this a very interesting video to have a good look at. There is a big South African community in New Zealand, and they're doing very well. It's hard to get going, but there's a support community of South Africans. And if there's one beef that the Kiwis have, that the New Zealanders have, it's that the South Africans stick together. Well, why wouldn't they? Alrighty, I'll let you watch the video, and I hope this helps, Shireen.
South Africans began immigrating to New Zealand in numbers in the mid-1990s. While the journey is much easier today than when Europeans first arrived by boat in the 19th century, simply fitting in presents a much bigger problem. It's all about setting up home in a new land.
If we don't get nice feather dusters in this place.
One thing I do miss is the shoes, because the shoes are crap here. Sorry, but they are.
Listening to this, you'd imagine the great trek from South Africa and setting up a new life in beautiful New Zealand is little more than a frivolous adventure. But as South African expat Ryk Hutting tells us, that's not the case.
Go for a chat.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's.
I couldn't find any work. Applied for probably 60, 70 jobs. I got one interview. It didn't go too badly. They said, hey, they'll call me back, and I'm still waiting for the call, you know. So I realized that, no, I have to make my own plan.
Playwright and former journalist with Vrye Weekblad and Losleef magazine, Hutting luckily didn't have to wait for that call. He stumbled on the opportunity to start his own business and almost overnight started repairing shoes and cutting keys.
I stood there and I looked at the place and I thought, but I can do this. And I made him an offer. He accepted.
Trying to make a foreign country home can have some dramatic consequences. The South African divorce rate among immigrants to New Zealand is high. Loneliness is a factor, and breadwinners often have to resort to some unusual and difficult things to survive. Carol Vennecourt used to work as a caterer in South Africa, but to do similar work here in New Zealand, cooking food to sell from home, by law, Carol has to build a separate kitchen. With her husband out of work, she doesn't have spare cash to undertake such a task, so she sells at markets, like in this hospital.
Hi, morning. Can I help you? Yes. Are you South African? Oh, do you praat jy Afrikaans?
But the markets just don't provide enough. So Carol made a plan.
I decided to go and earn some money, and I went bus driving. Now, I know everybody thinks this is very strange, a baker in a bus. I saw the advert in the local little rag we had here, and I saw bus drivers wanted, no experience necessary, all training given, and I thought, that's me.
A professional woman driving a public bus, something you wouldn't quite see in South Africa.
It is the nicest thing I've done in years. I just love driving a bus. You meet new people and there's different people, and I really enjoy it.
Did you ever fix shoes before?
No, never,
keys
never.
or?
No, nothing. Man, it was a very difficult learning curve. First 2 years, I'd say I probably did my 14 to 16 hours a day. It was grueling.
That on top of moving home across the ocean, immigration is a massive event.
Everything is new. You go through a complete existential crisis.
Happily, Ryk has moved on from that despairing state. And while Carol finds satisfaction in meeting her new challenges, other immigrants find comfort in their togetherness and music from home. A group of mostly Afrikaans women have formed the Umoya Choir. While it achieved relative prominence by performing at the opening of a Tri-Nations test in Wellington, it also serves as a support mechanism.
The biggest reason why we left was because of crime. They killed my brother and my father. They murdered them.
Where were they?
We had a filling station, a petrol station, and they murdered them in cold blood.
Rake also left South Africa because of the crime.
Our house got burgled for the third time and she'd just been sort of hijacked again.
Rake works in the Auckland suburb of Browns Bay. Many South Africans live here, like Elsabe and Francois Esterhuizen, who own the South African shop.
I had my own company, building and putting up security fences. So there was a lot of work for me, yes.
There's no security fences here.
There's a few, but you can pick it on your one hand.
The South African shop serves as a hub for Auckland's South Africans. Another point of contact is Jan Coetzee, a name familiar to many expats for his radio show on Auckland's Planet FM.
Goeiemiddag luisteraars, dis 3:05, dis Sondagmiddag. U is ingeskakel op 104.6 Planet FM, waar u luister na die Protea Uur, die tweetalige radiostem vir Suid-Afrikaners wat in Auckland woon.
The aim of the radio program is to keep the South African community together. Jan interviews other expatriates and entrepreneurs and small business owners in need of support. Soon after his arrival in New Zealand in 2001 with his wife and daughter, Jan found himself running the Protea Hour on community radio. While his marriage didn't survive, his skills as a business consultant have allowed him to observe South Africans at work in the local community.
Most South Africans are pretty assertive in their employment relationships. That sort of attitude doesn't seem to work here. You've got to be far more user-friendly than what we are used to in South Africa.
In fact, some South Africans are intent on recreating life as it was back home.
The South African people bought this house, and the first thing they did was build this high fence. Really, really high, big concrete fence, and then a big flagpole, and they fly the old South African flag on this flagpole. That's actually a symbol of something that we don't want to have anything to do with.
Auckland hairdresser Michael Gullery was a law student when he protested against the infamous Springbok rugby tour of 1981. While he describes his South African clients as good people, he questions the South African willingness to integrate into New Zealand society.
They tend to cluster together. So you get these sort of little districts, like Torbay, Browns Bay on the North Shore, in Auckland, where there's a lot of South Africans that live in this little group. So you find that the shopkeepers are all South African, the teachers in the schools are all South African. In most New Zealand streets, you will walk down the street and you look at that house as a Maori, that house as a white New Zealander, that house as a Samoan, over there is Chinese, there's Indians, and we all live together mixed up on the streets.
After 12 years in the country, Rake says South Africans can be misunderstood.
South Africans come across as being arrogant. And being a South African, you know that they're not. They're just loud and, whereas New Zealand is quite subdued.
Yes, we both speak English and play rugby, but New Zealand is in fact a very different culture, and South Africans struggle to adapt. Jan Coetzee gave us an example on his favourite morning walk.
I got out of the South African shop. There were 3 rather bulky South Africans standing on the sidewalk, dressed in typical safari suits. They were standing there and in Afrikaans discussing some of the darker-skinned local inhabitants, making very crude and rude remarks.
So you stopped them and said something?
Yes. I realized that I couldn't leave it, turned around and spoke to them in Mooi Afrikaans and reminded them that that wasn't the typical way of treating people who inhabit the country in which you are a guest.
Almost inevitably, personal relationships also take strain. It was quite telling that we found Jan on the beach, alone.
Unfortunately, some relationships seem to be vulnerable through immigration and in the process of immigration.
It's one of the saddest things. People are in this beautiful country, and so many South Africans have lost their marriages.
Yes, perhaps lose focus of what life is really about when we get thrown into the deep end of creating new lives for ourselves and new careers. People grow apart.
But Jan is looking forward. Living in a foreign country with no family but a few good friends, he's making the most of his new life, like sharing Carol Vennecourt's weekly recipe.
Next on our program is our weekly recipe slot, given by Carol Vennecourt, also known as the Cook Sister Queen.
Hello, good morning listeners. This is Carol Vennecourt. Yeah, I'm back on my bus again and I've got a really great recipe for you. We'll go right back to basics and we'll do pancakes.
A happy Carol embracing life in New Zealand. Not all South Africans are as lucky, finding comfort instead while they try to adapt in familiar accents and languages. Anything that reminds them of home.